Alright guys, so right now I'm sitting on Benda 500 and actually this bike feels really good, but I would say that it feels very low. Alright, handlebars are really nicely adjusted, I would say. I feel really good. I'm riding with the passenger right now, so let's start the bike. Ooh, have you heard that sound, guys? Alright, let's go. Haven't been riding cruisers for a long time. Alright guys, so I'll tell you right away, this is not a fast bike for sure. Actually, this machine is pretty heavy, so the weight of the bike is something around 250 kilograms. And I don't really care about the weight too much because the other day I rode ZH2 and that bike is pretty heavy, right? 230 or 40 kilograms, but it feels really light. And this bike feels pretty heavy. So once I stop on a traffic light with a passenger, I feel as if I'm about to lose my balance, you know? I have to put both of my feet on the ground and I feel as if I'm a noob. So it's not the most pleasant feeling. By now, my ears, they're in pain. This bike is so loud, gosh. I just hope that cops would not tell me that I bombed the roads like they did last time I rode KTM Super Duke. Yeah, this bike feels pretty slow, to be honest. It feels way less torquey than Benda 700. Yeah, it has way less power. I expected a bit more in terms of acceleration. Oh gosh, how loud it is. Guys, I don't want to actually open the throttle completely, and that's because I'm afraid of acceleration. I'm just afraid of the sound. It sounds so bad. I mean, it sounds badass, I guess, but I was not ready for this amount of sound. Yeah, actually, I feel like it would be a distant nemesis of some of those Harley Davidsons. This bike is very stable, so the stability is really good. The bike is pretty heavy, so the curb weight of the bike is 241 kilograms. Which is not light. The downside of the weight and the downside of this style of a motorcycle is that the bike is not maneuverable and you have to be stuck in the traffic as if you're driving a car, to be honest, which I'm not a big fan of. Guys, just now the bike made a sound and the sound comes from the air suspension, and this machine is readjusting the height of the bike by itself. So I've been told that air suspension is really smart. It can check your body weight and your height, and it can readjust the suspension according to your height and weight. I don't really know whether it's true or not, but it's constantly making those noises like psst, psst. So the suspension is sucking the air all the time in order to make the bike a bit taller or lower. Yeah, and I feel like this is a pretty cool feature, but not very optimal for me. I don't think that actually I need that on the bike. Actually, the bike is pretty low for me anyway. The only thing I would say is that ground clearance on this bike, if the suspension is really low, is too low for me to feel comfortable. I scratched the asphalt a couple of times because the suspension is really low and I don't like it a lot. By the way, if you want to go up, you just press this button on the left and you see there's an indicator that the bike is lifting up. This machine is not super fast. The top speed of it is 165 kilometers per hour, which is enough, to be honest, for me. Acceleration from 0 to 60 or from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour is 7.1 seconds. On paper, it's still right for a cruiser, but to be honest, this bike doesn't feel snatchy. This bike doesn't feel as fast as some other cruisers that I have tested. For example, CLC 450, even though that bike is in a different class, I would say, that's a bobber, and this bike is like a full-blown cruiser, which is way heavier and so on, but that bike feels way faster. Another complaint of mine is that I think that this bike is too loud. So much so that today I woke up with a headache, and the only reason behind the headache is that I was riding this bike yesterday. Yeah. And to be honest, over time, the super loud engine becomes a bit tedious. And there is no way around. Not that I'm revving the engine too much, it's just constantly super loud. And I'm constantly afraid that I would have some problems with cops. So if you're living somewhere in a quiet neighborhood, probably your neighbor's not going to be very satisfied about your new bike if you're going to go with this option. Gosh, it feels so low. It feels as if I'm like riding on the asphalt. And guys, I'll tell you one thing. Right now, the bike is so low that every time I'm running over some bumps, even though the suspension is really soft and nice, but I'm just afraid of scratching the bottom of my bike. I did try to make the bike tall, and you can do that. You can regulate it. You can make it pretty tall. But still, unfortunately, I don't know why, the bike doesn't listen to me. It thinks that it knows better, and it brings the bike down. Alright guys, so as you can see, I feel pretty confident in traffic like this, because this is not a super dense traffic. But once you have to squeeze through some cars or other things, this bike is way too heavy for that thing. Again, the clutch is very soft. You'll never get tired of pressing it up. So guys, as you can see right now, I'm on the second gear. I tried to downshift like this, and nothing is happening, which I don't like. So yeah, you have to move the bike a little bit, and then yeah, you can downshift. But again, this is the problem of these bikes. Some of those QG motorbikes, they have this issue. This Benda bike has this issue. Not that this is the big problem, but you have to pay attention to it. And from time to time, once you ride for a long time, and once you encounter this problem for 5-10 times, it gets a bit tedious. So I wish those gearboxes on these Chinese bikes would be a bit smoother. And those levers, by the way, they are adjustable, so yeah, it's a nice thing to have. Yeah, so my biggest complaint about this bike is the air suspension, which is not super high quality. And other than that, I just don't like that bike doesn't listen to what I want. The bike keeps on changing the seat height and other things. But guys, I still think that this is one of the most beautiful and most badass looking cruisers that you can come across. The way it looks is just incredible. I do like the ergonomics, even though the bike feels pretty alright once you ride fast, but on a slow speed it feels bad. Brakes are really nice. Again, it wouldn't be a problem if the bike would have dual disc, but that single 320mm disc feels good enough, to be honest. And the rear brake, let me check it one more time for you. Yeah, the rear brake actually is good as well, 260mm. So guys, overall, as a conclusion, I feel like this bike is nice. It's just not for me. This is not the best bike for a city. This bike is not maneuverable. So if you live in suburbs, if there is like no traffic and you can just ride around like I do right now, this bike would be a nice motorcycle. If you are a shorter rider, probably this air suspension, which is getting low all the time, would be a good thing for you. But for me, this bike feels too low, and even when you bring it up to the maximum height, it still feels a bit low. It feels as if I'm too close to the ground, and the ground clearance is way too short. Hello my dear people, and welcome to the channel. This time I'm talking about Benda BD500, this bike. And so far, this is the first cruiser, no, I would say this is the first Chinese motorcycle which has V4 engine. So without further ado, let's talk about this machine in details. And I'll start right away with the engine. So this is V4 liquid cooled engine. It has 54 horsepower, 42 Nm of torque, and as I already mentioned, this is the first Chinese V4. This bike is really loud. Every time I twist the throttle open, I'm just afraid that cops are going to come over and tell me that my bike is too loud. This is how loud it is. Actually, I'm not a big fan of this noise, but perhaps people who like riding cruisers would love it a lot. And the second remarkable thing about this machine is that it has air suspension. In my opinion, this technology is a bit redundant. I don't think that this bike has to have air suspension. To be honest, personally, I don't like it a lot. Plus, it's not very reliable. The first time I wanted to rent this bike, this air suspension was broken, so the bike was really low and I was scratching the asphalt all the time. Benda claims that this air suspension is smart, which means that it can adapt to your body weight and even your height. Just now, as you can see, I leaned over the bike and it started moving without my will. Guys, once you sit on a bike, this suspension is going to automatically adjust to your weight. You see, right now it's moving up, so the air is getting into that suspension. And this is a really cool feature, but I'm not a big fan of it anyway. And from time to time, when you ride in the traffic, the bike goes up and down without your will. Some people probably are gonna like it, but I like to be in control 100% of time, and when bike does something without my will, I don't like it too much. Talking about the seat height, of course, as you can see, taking that it has this air suspension, the seat height might be adjusted, but once I sit on the bike, yeah, I'll look like that. To be honest, right now you can see that the bike is going up, and I still feel as if this bike is way too low for me. So my height is 1 meter 85 centimeters. Right now it got as high as possible, and I feel pretty comfortable and confident riding this machine. But again, I wish this machine could get a bit higher than that. But guys, I'll tell you one thing. Once you start riding Benda 500, you feel great because you can see that huge, enormous fuel tank. You can see those really nice handlebars, and you feel really good. You feel as if you're a real biker. You know what I'm talking about? The tank capacity, by the way, is 16 liters, which is still enough for the city. I really like the way I feel behind those bars. I'm talking about the bike bars, not other bars. Actually, these handlebars don't only look good, they have different features. For example, here on the left side, we have cruiser control. You can adjust speed, you can make it faster, slower. You can also adjust the seat height. Here, there's the button which can help you to adjust the seat height. Let me show you. So right now, we're slowly moving up. Just need to keep it pressed. So this is the top height of the suspension. It cannot go any higher. And once you press the button like that, yeah, you go down. So it's pretty nice to have. But again, as I already mentioned, sometimes when you're riding, the bike doesn't listen to what you want, and it keeps on readjusting the seat height by itself. And on the right, there are two buttons. This one is traction control system, and that one is ABS. So you can turn them off if you want. However, I don't really know why cruiser like that has to have those features. I do think that those are redundant features on this bike. Tell me what you think, guys. Over here we can see this round dash, which looks pretty nice. I really like that this is not a TFT dash. I do like this triangular part, which is LCD, so you can actually get all the information you need. Looks pretty nice if you ask me. And on the front, this bike has 320mm disc, and it has 4-piston Brembo caliper. And from behind, Benda 500 BD has 260mm disc. This bike doesn't have chain drive, it has belt drive, and this is V drive. From the front, BD500 has an upside down front suspension. It's non-adjustable, but I feel like they did find a sweet spot. One thing to mention is that BD500 has really nice black and shiny wheels. I do like them. And on the front wheel, we have really thick and fat tire. So I like the design a lot. This bike has round LED classic looking headlight from the front, and from behind we have this really nice elegant LED taillight. This bike has really nice seat, so it's really pleasant to ride for a long time. My passenger feels good as well. The only thing I don't like about this bike is that it's not very maneuverable. So if you're looking for a bike for a city, this bike would not be the best option so far. Benda BD500 is available in two options. So right now we have the most expensive option, which costs 36,000 RMB, and easy way to differentiate this bike from the cheaper option is that it has this really big and thick, pretty angular pipe. It has one pipe from each side. Talking about the gearbox, I would say that this gearbox is good enough. This bike has 6-speed gearbox. Perhaps it's not the smoothest gearbox in the game. It's not as good as on CLC 450, but it's still decent enough. From time to time, I cannot find neutral, and from time to time when I try to ride fast, I cannot slip into the second gear and I keep on slipping into neutral. But overall, you're not looking for the best performance because this is a cruiser bike, and I feel like this gearbox is good enough for the money. And guys, even though this is a classic bike, it still has some neo features, I would say. So the fuel gauge is over here. You can see it looks pretty nice. It feels as if this is some sort of a pyramid, so people like it a lot. Alright guys, so I personally think that this is one of the most beautiful cruisers that you can come across, and I think that by now this is the most beautiful, most good looking cruiser from China. Tell me what you think about that bike, please. I really want to know what you say. One thing I want to point out is that Benda 500 has ride-by-wire throttle, which is a pretty nice thing to have, but to be honest, it doesn't feel too responsive. Once you start riding fast, you twist the throttle open, and then the acceleration comes a bit later than you expected, I would say. Guys, this bike is packing so many things, but to be honest, if I would be picking up a bike for myself, I would definitely not go with that air suspension. I feel like it's too complicated, it's easy to break and so on, and overall it's not too reliable, so I would just go with average shock or monoshock or dual shock, doesn't matter. Alright guys, so this was my humble opinion on Benda BD500. I do think that this bike is really good. This is some sort of an experiment, and I do want to encourage Benda to keep on doing those things because I think that they push the competition, which is a really good thing. Guys, if you like my video, please leave me a comment in comment section below. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I see you in the next videos. Bye everybody.